I'm Martin Russ, author of Optimize the Moment, a guide to lead decisively, plan strategically, and communicate effectively. Welcome to my podcast.
Hi, Martin.
Hi, Heather. How are you?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to talking about how the landscape has changed with strategic planning, which is one of the key early components in your book.
Well, as I've been talking to business leaders recently and about the book, it's a constant theme that the landscape has changed. And we talk a lot about how we live in turbulent times. I don't really know what other word. It's unsettling. It's difficult. We have not been here before, regardless of what some might think. The parameters, the tools that leaders have to use are not there. They're just not there before as they were. The traditional models, the strategic plans, the kinds of things that leaders, executives would use to navigate their ship, their business, don't apply anymore. A variety of things have changed. They have to be a lot more transparent than they used to. The supply chains don't exist the way they used to. The way they interact with staff and the way they interact with suppliers and customers, all of those things have changed. So they need an entirely different skill set than they had even just a few short years ago. The language that they use has changed with staff, with customers, with suppliers, with the entire stakeholder chain has changed than even just a few years ago. All of that in the context of it being so unsettled and different and people being very much on edge.
So we have a few great metaphors. This has been the year of the once in a millennia hurricane, about 2 weeks in a row right now. And we're talking about Florida in the U.S.
Yes. Wow. It's we've seen a variety of weather patterns in general.
Yeah.
That across the U.S. and across here in Canada, we had clouds here in Ottawa this week that, and I'm not going to try and pronounce it because it's a cloud formation.
Astericus, I think they call it.
Well, good for you. That's probably much closer than I would have got. But these are things that are just not seen before, right? So winds of change is definitely in the air. I know at my little hobby farm on the edge of town, we've been measuring rain in inches this year. We've had rainfall off the record. So more rain than has ever been recorded in a year before. So by lots of measures, our environment has changed, physically as well as, kind of the world in which we operate. And so it causes all of us to be I think unsettled emotionally, psychologically, as well as how we interact. And it affects all kinds of, 95% of our businesses are small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses. And not surprisingly, it affects those the most. And so small businesses are having an even harder time. So they're having a harder time getting staff, getting people who want to work, getting people to cover kind of the same jobs that were there before. I think about people who have grocery stores who prior to this period, say 4 years ago, had 250 people to cover the shifts that they needed covered. So it was a good sized grocery store, but a grocery store. Today they have to have 450 people to cover the same number of shifts and to do exactly the same, jobs and functions and work.
Can you explain why?
Well, again, it's people who don't necessarily want to work
Full time.
So they're juggling shifts. People who don't want to come to work, and it just takes that many more people to cover those shifts today than it did before. I'm sure. There's all sorts of analysis around this. Some of this is people who have more people with anxiety, more people who seem to have and require medical time off, more people with different kinds of issues, right? People who it seems to be, there are more issues that people have today requiring time off than did before. So in order to cover the same amount of work, call it productivity, that had, say, 250 people doing it before, right? We're not talking, computer coding or rocket science. This is a grocery store, and managing, taking care of, stocking of shelves and produce and cutting meat and those sorts of things. Those types of functions haven't really changed for a long time. It now requires 450 people to do the work of what 250 people did before. That to me is very telling.
And what does it tell you? Just for people who are listening in, because I think there are applications to how you approach business and how you can be effective, but you have to think differently.
It does. So what it reinforces is that the business model has fundamentally changed. And so the leaders and the people who own that business and run that business have had to fundamentally turn the business model on its head, both, in terms of the planning, the finances, all the elements that go into it. So who's going to lead? How are they going to lead? On any given day, what's the mission, right? How are they going to define that mission? How are they going to communicate that mission? How are they going to put the people on the right teams? The grocery store is a great analogy. I could talk about it all afternoon.
Yeah.
Because, the people who run the meat department are different than the people who run the produce department, who are different than the run, each and every other department. So each department has a mission for that day, that time, that week. You got to define the parameters of that mission, and you've got to give those people authority to make decisions within that mission. You can't stand over them.
Mm-mm.
and micromanage and wait for that. That's something else that I see every week that goes by is businesses that operate in silos, right? We hear that all the time.
Yeah.
So in my example of the grocery store, you have silos, right? The meat department, the produce department, the pharmacy department, all those could be analogous to the silos in a tech company.
Sure.
Right. And so in the tech company, no one in those silos is allowed to make a decision. It all has to go up to somebody, and possibly somebody in another country, who's responsible for making that decision. So I've seen very recently, again, a team has a mission. They've defined the mission, defined the parameters. They know what they want to do. They've got the team of people motivated to go out and do it. It's a great proposal. It's going to advance the mission, their mission, but also the mission of the company forward. They put it forward. They wait for a decision, a green light to go. Wait 7 months for a green light. And it waits and waits. And so they're in limbo. And so the team's in limbo. The mission waits in limbo, which is not the mission then can pass everybody, like the opportunity passes by. So there's an opportunity cost. Those people who were prepared to be on the team, they're going to take other opportunities, right? They're going to go, 5, 6, 7 months for a green light to go on a mission, right? So who's in charge?
Yeah.
Who has the authority to make decisions? Somebody had, and especially in this environment, in this day and age, somebody has to be in charge. Somebody has to have the authority to make decisions, green light, red light on a mission, and go. Limbo is bad. Limbo is bad it's bad for all of us. But in this environment especially, it is a mood killer. It's a motivation killer. It kills retention, right? It kills ideas, and it, for organizations that want to move forward, it just stops the organization dead in its tracks.
And that hits productivity.
Well,
Productivity
it's worse.
killer.
I would suggest it's worse than that. It actually costs organization. Well, the example that I'm thinking of, cost the organization a lot of money. So it didn't just cost them productivity. It cost them a lot of money.
So is that a mismatch or a misalignment in timing, in not giving people the freedom to play to their strengths?
It's an example of how an organization is still using a business model and a business tool from
Back
before
in the day.
and trying to apply it to today's environment.
Yeah.
And it's just a business model that no longer works. So, those silos, where people, from the produce department who know their mission and know what to do, right? They've got a team and they know the parameters, they need to be given the authority to make decisions within their mission.
Sure. So if there's a supply chain disruption for whatever reason, let's say the port strikes that we had recently, or infrastructure issues, you can't get things in, that they could probably find solutions within their own team when they're purpose-driven, have a clear mission, and it doesn't even become an issue higher up to have to wait for a response because they have been given the freedom and the trust by the higher-ups.
Right.
So this comes back to the core of strategic planning. When you talk about getting buy-in from people, who are you doing it for? And quite often you have identified that boards and shareholders are determining what the strategic plan is. And employees often feel they're not heard.
Well, they're not heard. They often don't see themselves at all in the plan.
Yep.
And study after study says that somewhere between 90 and 95% of employees couldn't tell you what their organization's strategic plan was. Let alone be able to execute on it.
Yeah.
Or, do anything to be helpful towards it.
Yeah.
Right. The strategic plan was a check in the box exercise for the board.
Yeah.
To say to people that they'd done one, and listen, doing something, at a board level and setting some overall goals, it's great. Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Doing something is great. There are today better, I think, better options available. Certainly more immediate options available, and better, working exercises, especially today when I think boards need to be a lot more engaged than they ever have been before. And I get the difference between governance boards and advisory boards and operating boards and the different types of organizations. Absolutely, I understand that. But, even a governance board today, and there are legal reasons for doing so, needs to be a lot more engaged with organizations than they used to be because they are liable and they need to understand what's going on. And they can't just sort of say, hands off, wasn't my decision. They are liable for what goes on in those organizations. And in this environment, when things are moving fast, they still need to understand what's happening.
So how do they optimize the moment?
Well, they need to read the book.
Perfect. On we go.
So that's a cheesy answer, but the reality
It's
is
true.
that, they number one need to recognize that they need to do things differently.
Yeah.
And that applying yesterday's business models and business decision making today isn't going to work, and that throwing things against the wall and hoping it'll stick isn't going to work. And there's lots of evidence of that today. With the turnover of the C-suite like crazy all around us, all sorts of very rapid and reactionary decision-making going on in the marketplace.
Yeah.
I see this among a lot of the major organizations, turning on their ear, even this year, seeing rapid changes. We're going to buy this company. No, we're going to buy that company. We're going to, go after this core business. No, we're going to go after that core business. No wonder, even senior management and media management are left scratching their heads. What are we doing?
It's rudderless ship in a way. You also cite in your book a recent Gallup poll that 32% of employees feel a sense of engagement in their jobs.
32%.
32%, which means that 68%
do not.
2/3 of a workforce not engaged in their job.
Yeah,
it's huge.
I think it's probably higher than that. Some anecdotal evidence recently, because we've gone through some year ends recently.
Yep.
With companies where the company came out and the first thing they did in doing their, they do their town hall meetings, things at the end of the year, and they talked about, EBITDA and, top line revenue growth and earnings per share.
Sure, that resonates with the
and how much, profitability, and their goal for the year was to grow, profitability by, 7% or 10%. And they talked like this, honestly, for half an hour.
Well, no, I've been in those town halls.
And
I get you.
What happened was 80 to 90% of the staff turned out probably within about 5 minutes, right? Maybe 10 at the most. And if their goal at all was to retain the staff that they have, I would argue that a significant number of that 80 to 90% of the staff that tuned out, the first thing those staff were doing was going online looking for another job. Because who wants to be part of an organization whose mission and motivation is defined by making more money for the principals?
Yeah.
And instead, they've been told that what they do is important at some point. Like their immediate manager or their immediate boss has said, I need you to write this or do that, or, we're trying to help so and so. Well, actually, if it's just been devalued by somebody saying, actually, our big goal here is to make more money for this partner or this principal. No, right? Like
for shareholders.
Yeah, no. So their role has just been completely devalued, diminished. Their purpose has been devalued and diminished. And so if you want to go work for some cold, heartless, firm where your value is determined by utilization, some utilization report, then, there's lots of those out there.
Yeah. It's interesting you talk about that. I was going to make a crack comment about working in a communist regime and factory, because that is utilitarian. I mean, but what you're saying is you need empathy. People need to feel as though they're heard. Doesn't mean you have to kowtow to demands or take anything unreasonable. You, in your book, you talk about the lack of connection to mission or purpose in the company, lack of clarity of expectations, lack of opportunities to learn and grow, lack of freedom to be able to do what you do best, lack of care and concern for employees' welfare. And this all comes to strategic plans that are actually not designed for the real world. And you, Optimize the Moment, is about real world strategic planning.
Well, there's lots of great, analogies and quotes about, how a small, what makes you think a small group of people can actually change the world? Because it's the only thing that ever has. And,
that's great.
And there are lots of small companies and small, groups of people who, when they put their heads together and define their mission and focus on and are committed to that purpose and that cause, do remarkable things. And you don't necessarily need, large groups of people, to do great things. Small groups of people who are committed and purposeful and driven and smart, but who are on the team, can actually get a lot done.
Sure.
And I know this from my own business. I know this, from helping lots and lots of other, great organizations who are getting it right. We talk about the mission, but we also talk about building the right team.
Yeah.
And how you do that, and how you build that team, and communication's important. Well, not just important; it's
mission critical.
Mission critical. Doing that intelligence gathering and intelligence gathering has a lot to do with asking the right questions.
Yes.
And seeking out the advice and opinions of all sorts of different people. Contrarians, people who are not like-minded.
Yeah.
And actually listening to them. Yeah. So, those small groups of people, if you listen to them, can help you choose the right language today. And, language is really, really, really important. Not just choosing the right language, but avoiding the wrong language.
Because language evolves.
Because language evolves.
Yeah.
And the language that we use, it does not happen by default. We have to choose it. So the good news is we can choose it, right? It's one of the very few things when we wake up in the morning that we have some control over. We can choose, how we dress, how we present ourselves, and the language that we choose to use, and therefore, it's part of our presentation, our brand, if you will. But the flip side is also true, right? How we are not.
Yes.
So that's the language that we choose not to use, how we choose not to present ourselves. And I think in today's day and age, that's every bit as important.
Absolutely.
If not more so.
Well, we're competing with so many other messages.
Well, because but it's also because it's easy to slip into
Sure.
the not category.
Yes. I have that. I'd love your take on it. We're coming to kind of the end here. But when you talked about the town halls, I was in a town hall once with, let's just say, a gentleman who started off by talking about his yacht. And he instantly lost pretty much the whole room. And they started looking down on their phones and probably checking, other stuff. Lost the entire room.
Yeah.
Because no one in that room had a yacht. And what he reinforced was that you're here, you're coming to my beck and call. I've got the mic, and I'm going to start off by telling you that I have a yacht, and instantly create a divide. And I can tell you definitively that company is in serious trouble.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is true at a very basic level. What words do you choose to present?
Yeah. Well, listen, part of, my background and where I learned an awful lot and still continue to learn is by being part of political campaigns.
Yeah.
Political campaigns are very focused. They're very short in time frame, but they bring a lot of people together from all walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the great things about them is that they're full of volunteers. Yeah. So, I don't care whether the person next to you has a yacht or a bicycle, it doesn't matter. You're all there working for a cause that you believe in, whether you know the candidate yourself or not. Everybody has a reason for being part of that campaign. It's great. And I make no judgment about the political stripe. That's not what it's about. But I encourage people to be part of political campaigns, regardless of your age, mm-hmm. Because it's a great experience. You'll get to see that kind of focused, mission, team effort, how that works for a short period of time. And that people who run campaigns well, and learn to, build that team of volunteers, motivate those volunteers, accomplish great things over that period of that campaign. That's really interesting and fascinating to see and be part of.
And the underlying element of that, which is what we'll be talking about in next level thinking, is common cause for the common good.
Yeah.
And that's what we've kind of veered away from as a backdrop to all of what you're talking about. Yeah. And we need to find common ground again. Common sense, common ground.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Martin, so we've talked a lot about some of the specific contents of your book. How can people get the rest of them?
Optimize the Moment. It's available on Amazon, in the UK, in the US, in the UK at Waterstones, in the US at Barnes & Noble, here in Canada at
Indigo.
Indigo, thank you.
And as we go in to a variety of holidays coming up at any time of year, great host and hostess gift, great stocking stuffer, great Christmas gift for someone you work with. So optimize the moment.
Optimize the Moment.
Thanks, Martin.
Thank you.